Welcome to Legitimate Matters. This is your host, William Paris. Helicopter parenting, millennial entitlement, and children who cannot cope with failure. Well, what's that about? Well, my guest today, Allyson Hawkins Ward, is a life and business strategist and the best-selling author of Please Don't Come Home, Except for a Visit, a field guide to creating independent adults. Allyson, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
So exciting and such an interesting topic. I have nieces and nephews, and my nephews in particular have that entitlement thing going on, and I just do not understand it. But I've also heard that there's really no manual for raising children. So how did you come up with this particular book?
Well, you're right, there really isn't a manual. But I had the good fortune of having a mother who really was very good at parenting.
Okay.
She had a degree in early child care and development and social work, and all my life I heard her talking about essentially parenting things. She didn't say, I'm giving you good parenting advice, but that's what it was.
Okay.
And unfortunately, my mother passed away when my children were very young. And I knew that I needed more support, so I just started reading everything I could get my hands on because I wanted to be a great parent like her.
Right. Okay. So helicopter parenting, what is that?
Helicopter parenting is a parent who, it comes from the term of like the hovering sound a helicopter makes. So parents who are hovering over all of their children's activities.
Okay.
And so the difference between just being a good parent and a helicopter parent is a helicopter parent is somebody who has a lot of anxiety. They're afraid that if my son doesn't get an A on this test, it's going to be downhill for life. They're going to fail life if they don't get an A on this test. Or if they don't make the team, it's going to haunt them the rest of their life. Or another thing a helicopter parent does is they're very anxious about when the kids go outside. They're going to get hit by a car. They're going to drown in the pool, but overly so. Right.
Well, in my mind, I think that there is, a necessity to really make sure that we are watching, over our children, especially in the times that we live in. My concern is, are there then those children that tend to take advantage of that? So does the fault lie with the parent, or is it with that child that's like, well, okay, I'm going to take advantage of this?
I would say it's the parent.
It's the parent,
because we create the monsters.
Ah, right.
Right?
They didn't learn it on their own.
No, they did not learn it on their own. Absolutely not.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, we create the monsters.
Okay, so isn't it important, to take an interest in your child? So where do you draw that line between I'm a helicopter parent and maybe backing off too much?
Yeah. So again, of course, we want to take interest in our children, right?
Right.
Naturally, we want to look out for them. We want to provide for them. We want them to do better, be better, have more than we did, and that's normal, of course.
Right, sure.
It's that tipping point of the extra anxiety, the expectation, that sense of dread every time they walk out the door.
Really?
Another thing that happens is we think, oh, well, my mom wasn't my friend, or she was too tough for me. I'm going to make it easier for my kid. And then they go a little too far. My kid's going to be my best friend.
Oh,
well, your
really?
kids aren't supposed to be your best friend.
Right.
They need you there to guide them, to put up boundaries, because that's what's healthy.
Okay.
So that's...
So tell me this. Now you have baby boomers. That would be me. And then you have the millennials.
Yes.
My nephews. So what would you say is the difference between millennials and my generation in particular, the baby boomers?
So about the 70s, psychologists decided that children's egos were too fragile.
Oh.
And so they started, you see a change in parenting, and it's been institutionalized so that we want to praise them for everything that they do.
I see.
Right? We want to praise them, we want to praise them. And so there was a kind of a whole movement of things that changed. So here's when it came about, like now, think back when you were a kid, when you went to a sporting event, you know, there was a competition and they would recognize third place, second place, and first place.
Right.
Now I would go to my children's gymnastics meet.
Okay.
11th place, 10th place, 9th place, 7th, you know, all the way up, and people were getting participation trophies because we didn't want to leave anybody out, right?
Okay.
So that's a change, but now it sets up the expectation. You mentioned the word entitlement before.
Okay.
Well, I think that I'm going to get recognized just for showing up at work. Not because I've done a great job, but just because I've come. So, you know, that's the...
Well, you know, that's very interesting because I know someone, and I won't call any names, but there is someone that's close who happens to be a millennial, and we've had numerous conversations, and it's amazing to me that and they're very, very intelligent, but even though they're very intelligent, there are certain expectations that this particular individual has that I've noticed that they just tend to take for granted. Now, could this be a result of helicopter parenting? Is that where that comes from?
I would say it's a combination of the helicopter parenting, and that's what's been institutionalized.
Okay.
Because it's the teams, it's the schools, it's the sports who are giving out the participation trophy. So you can't only blame that on the helicopter parent. It's those two things hand in hand. There are other factors, but I would say those are two of the biggest factors.
And then, of course, when you have students in school who do well, and you have, as you're saying, teachers that constantly praise them, oh, you're great, you're wonderful, you're amazing, and then they get into the real world, and everyone doesn't treat them that way in the real world.
It's very difficult.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to talk more about that when we come back from break. Great conversation. Legitimate Matters, your host, William Paris. We'll be right back with my guest, Allyson Hawkins Ward. Stay tuned.
I'm a single mother, and I was the main one working, so I never thought that I could go back to school, you know? My sister, my mother, everybody wanted to help me with my kids. I could not have gotten my diploma without my family.
Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org.
Bye, Janet. It's nice seeing you again. You a good girl. Just let me know what I can do to help.
Well, to help me, she'd have to help every day. Every hour, every ouch, every time my wife calls for help. I mean, maybe she could help me make her lunch. But the crust, all the crust has to be cut off the corners. She could help me run to the doctor for the 5th time this week. Help me with the specialist and the second opinions and the painful paperwork about paperwork. Help me deal with how hard it is seeing my wife's name on so much paperwork. But this is on me. I'm the only one who can do this, like this, for her. Besides,
Take care.
we will. Janet doesn't like her cooking anyway.
Find support for your strength. Visit aarp.org/caregiving for care guides and community.
Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. I'm your host, William Paris, here with my guest, Allyson Hawkins Ward. And we're talking about helicopter parenting today. Allyson, I have a little saying that I've coined on my own, and it is, if you know you're crazy, you're not too far gone. Because I believe that if you recognize that you have a problem, you can still address it.
Yeah, makes sense.
Now, are there helicopter parents that don't realize it? Most of them don't. But how does one readjust themselves if they're really doing a child a disservice?
Yeah. Well, first of all, many don't realize they're doing it, and that's part of the big problem.
Right.
I've had people say to me, describe a situation, and then end the sentence with, "Well, it's not like I'm one of those helicopter parents."
Oh.
And I'm thinking to myself, you absolutely could be in the dictionary next to it, and a picture with you there. So they don't know, and I think in the past couple of years, the term has become more prevalent.
I
You've
see.
seen it in the news. So
Right.
those are the indicators. Sometimes teenagers will say to their parents, I can hear you hovering
You're
over me,
hovering,
right?
yeah.
Or other people will call them out on it.
Okay.
And if they're aware enough of themselves and their actions,
Mm-hmm.
they might then say, oh, okay, let me kind of check myself.
Pull back a little.
Pull back a little bit and take a recourse. But it's one of the reasons I wrote the book, though, because people don't really know what to do and maybe what they're doing that's not serving their children.
Well, I think that it's certainly something that needs to be addressed because it does do a disservice to the child because they need to be able to function in the real world, and that's the real problem. So one thing that you mentioned in your book is unwarranted praise. Tell us, what exactly is that?
Yeah. So it's praise for praise sake, meaning constantly complimenting the child. One of the things it's really important to do is when you give a compliment, there's two things. One, you want to make sure that you're complimenting and praising the effort more so than the accomplishment. In fact, there was a study that was done of fifth graders, 400 of them. They broke
Okay.
them into two groups. And one group, they said, they gave both of the groups the same set of puzzles to do. And they were challenging, but something they could handle. One group, they said, you must be so smart at this. The other group, they said, wow, you really must have worked very hard at this. Then the second round of the test came. And the group that was told that they must have been smart, they said, you have an option. You can do another puzzle, kind of a similar difficulty, or you can do something a little bit more challenging,
Okay.
but you're going to learn something. You'll learn a lot, in fact. Well, the group that was praised for being smart, almost all of them, 90% of them, said, I think I'll just stick with what I already know. The group that had been praised for their intelligence and their hard work at it, not their intelligence, but their hard work at it,
I see.
they said, oh yeah, like bring it on. They were ready for the new challenge.
Ah, okay, so now I understand. So what I'm understanding you say is that the person or the child who is just praised for being intelligent or smart or this is what you've accomplished wants to stay or remain in a comfort zone.
Exactly. No, in addition, they don't want to lose that status, right? Because now if I
Right.
do it and I
Sure.
don't fail, you're going to think I'm not smart anymore. And I want you to continue to think I'm smart. So I won't take any risks.
Wow. I can see how that can be damaging because, as we both know, when you get out into the real world, when you're in business and you start working on jobs, people they hire you to get the job done.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
And they have certain expectations, and if you accomplish those expectations, you keep your job. In many instances, you get a promotion, but they're not going to give you necessarily positive reinforcement every time you do something that's expected.
Right, right. And then also, too, how do you learn something new? You have to step out of where you are and kind of push the barrier a little bit further.
I see.
Right.
So now there's a correlation between failure and growth. So is there a healthy way to correct a child when they do fail?
Yeah. So a couple of things. One is that the first thing you want to do is you want to separate from the child that just because you failed at something does not mean you're a failure.
Okay.
So first, let's just understand that. I'm great, I'm accomplished, and I can fail at something. So understand that, first of all. And then secondly, you want to say, what did we learn? What did we learn from this? And then how can we take that learning and take it forward to another situation?
This is really a good conversation because I'm actually thinking about my own self and the some of my own personal challenges. I've been very fortunate to have a career, and throughout the course of my career, I have worked with great people, really good bosses who to this day are very, very good friends of mine. And we don't even work together, but we still keep in touch. But the one thing that I've heard more than one person say to me over the years is, wow, William, you're really hard on yourself. Yeah, you're really hard on yourself. And that, I believe, has a lot to do with confusing not getting something exactly right or perfect with failure when in actuality that's not what it is, but learning how to push myself to be the best that I can without internalizing it as failure.
That's such an important lesson.
Is that pretty much on point?
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Absolutely, because you want to do, in fact, I would go a step further and say, even let's say you set this goal, you know, you wanted to gain thinness, or you wanted to do something and you got here, but you might not have made it all the way to the goal. Let's celebrate what you did accomplish, right? And then great, now buckle down and figure out how you can get that extra, you know, get that extra few yards to the goal line, if you will.
Wow, this is amazing. Well, this is a great conversation that I'm having with Allyson. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to talk about that grit formula that you have in your book, Legitimate Matters, William Paris. We will be right back.
What if you could invest in the future of kids, like a stock? Not the kind of stock that's about making money, but a stock for social change. A whole new kind of investment called Better Futures. When you invest, it helps kids go to college. Believe in us, invest in us, watch us grow. My name is Sydney, and I'm your dividend.
I dare you. I dare you to change the world. Yeah, you. Getting that college education.
I dare you to be somebody important.
Like be a teacher. Or a reality TV star. I dare you to stand up here. To call the shots.
To be a role model.
An inspiration.
An innovator.
To be a teacher. Be my teacher.
Think you can change my life?
Make me excited about science like you.
Have a career that really means something?
Then do it.
I dare you. I dare you. I dare you. I'm waiting.
Hi, I'm William Paris. I am so excited about my new talk show, Legitimate Matters. My topics are inspiring, informative, and sometimes controversial. For show topics, upcoming guests, and hot topics, follow me on facebook.com/Legitimate Matters or on my YouTube channel, Legitimate Matters. Now, this show is for you because you're legitimate and you matter. Legitimate Matters. Welcome back to Legitimate Matters. I'm your host, William Paris, having a wonderful conversation with my guest, Allyson Hawkins Ward. Allyson, this is really a great conversation because we're talking about helicopter parenting, and it's interesting that I often find myself sometimes within the content of this very conversation. In your book, Don't Come Home, Except for a Visit, you talk about something called the grit formula. Tell us about that.
Sure. So the grit formula, I chose the word grit because grit means hard work.
Okay.
And it is hard work. If you want to accomplish anything, you usually have to work hard at it. So grit seemed like the perfect acronym. So in this context, it means G stands for having a game plan.
Okay.
You got to have a game plan. We don't just start off doing things without an end goal in mind. R stands for resourcefulness. We want to make sure that our teens are resourceful. That's one of the things, the skills that they need to have in life to be successful. I stands for investment. So we want to make sure that our teens have a sense about their money, they know how to budget, they know how to plan those things out. And then T finally stands for transformation. And transformation really speaks to communication. you're transforming that relationship. So it's communication between parent and child, and it's also then making sure the teen knows how to communicate with the world.
I see. So you talked about resourcefulness. Can you give us some examples of that?
Sure. One of the things I think that will make a teen more resourceful is to self-advocate.
Okay.
So an example like that, oftentimes you will hear parents will go into the classroom and say, my kid didn't get an A on this test. What's wrong with you? You didn't see their brilliance, you know. Now, when I was growing up, my parents would never go into the classroom and speak to the teacher on my behalf.
Right.
My parents, first of all, would say, why didn't you get the A?
Agreed.
Right? And then it was up to me to figure out how to get it corrected. Whether it meant talking to a teacher, studying harder, whatever it did, it was up to me. That has switched. Oftentimes now parents are going in. So there are times, sure enough, that we need to fight for a grade.
Sure.
But it's incumbent upon the child to do it, not the parent.
I have do they still have open school night? Where
Yes.
parents go up, because isn't that the time for the parent to go up and speak with the children, speak with the teachers, and
Yes.
and get a better understanding of not just how their child is performing, but healthy ways that they can support their child, as opposed to being overly involved. Isn't that what that's
Yes,
for?
I would say, so like in my children's school, we have back to school night, right? So it's the beginning of
Okay.
the school year, and you go through each class your child has, and they say, here's your expectations, and you can, you know, learn from the teacher as you suggested. Then we have parent-teacher conferences, which is
Okay.
more one-on-one about my child. So
Oh, I see.
what
Okay.
I suggest people do is, maybe not the youngest ages, but by the time your kid's in middle school or high school, they ought to be going to the parent-teacher conference. I mean, it is about them, right?
Right. It is, yes.
So, you know, we've learned a lot from those. And I encourage my daughters to open their mouths and ask questions if they don't agree with or understand what they're hearing. So that's really the time for that.
And you also talked about transformation. What is? Tell us more. Can you give me an
Sure.
example of that,
Yeah.
of transformation?
So transformation is about communication.
Okay.
So what that means is when my teen goes to college, clearly she's been living down the hall from me all, 18 years, and we talked every day.
Okay.
Now, what's the expectation? You need to have an expectation clearly communicated between you and your child of how frequently will you talk? Maybe even what will you talk about?
Okay.
So it's setting expectations for how you're going to communicate. That's part of it. The other part of it is making sure they know how to communicate with the outside world. If they've never written a thank you letter,
Oh.
you want to make sure they know how to write a thank you letter. You know, when someone sends them money at school, or they have their first job interview, do they know to send a thank you letter? Do they know how to stand up and say hello on an interview, and to shake hands and to look that person in the eye? So
Right.
those are some of the things about communication they need to know.
How you navigate.
Exactly.
How you navigate
How you navigate.
in the real world.
Absolutely.
And-
And how you stand out.
Right.
Because many people don't do that. So you will stand out if you're that one who needs to come and say hi. You know, and you
Right,
come
and
in
you
and you
shake
shake
your
hands
hand.
and you look in their eye.
Absolutely.
Right.
And also being able to be comfortable with who you are
Yes.
while you're navigating, because when you, for me personally, as I have had to navigate in the corporate world, and it changes constantly. As you said, you mentioned things like thank you letters and the interview, how to dress,
Right.
and being able to talk about yourself in a way that comes across in a way that is professional.
Yes.
And that's something that you learn, but you need to really be prepared for, because if you go into an interview, as an example, and you're sitting across from a particular a person that may be considering you for a position, if you sit and you just pull yourself back and you wait for all of the questions,
Right.
and you only answer as opposed to relaxing and letting that person get to know you, that really makes the difference. And I see that as being part of that transformation.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think you're right. And I would go one step further.
Okay.
I have to also know how to ask about you. How are you?
Right.
It's nice to see you again, making those pleasantries
Ah,
and not being
yes.
completely self-centered as well.
Oh,
right?
well, that's important.
Well, it is
Oh,
important, but people don't.
Entitlement. Oh, did we just come full circle back
There
to
you
that
go.
again? Absolutely. Now, as a parent, in the next couple of minutes, for a parent raising a child, are there, let's say, two conversations at some particular point that you just need to have with your child?
Yeah, I would say one of them is when your teen gets to, I like to say it's around the time they get their driver's license.
Okay.
It's important for them to understand I'm still your parent and I've set boundaries. At the same time, you want them to start transitioning to independence while they live with you. And the reason for that is they're going to make mistakes, right? It's part of life.
Right.
And you can support them while they're there. So for instance, my daughter, when she got her driver's license, my younger one, she would come home and say, Mom, can I go over to so-and-so's house tonight or go to a movie or do whatever it is? And once she got her driver's license, because I wanted to prepare her for moving out,
Sure.
I'd say, I don't know. Can you go? Have you done your homework? Are you prepared for whatever you need to do tomorrow or whatever it is? Let her make the decision. And I would check in. If she went off the rails, I could say, okay, time out, wait a minute. But I would help her, show her the things that she needs to consider to make those decisions.
So you gave her room to grow.
Yes.
You gave her an opportunity to make decisions on her own.
Yes.
As opposed to just answering the question and continuing to make the decision for her.
Exactly. And it also showed her that I had trust and faith in her and her ability. So it helped her to build confidence in herself.
Awesome, awesome. Well, Allyson, this has been such an amazing conversation. I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot about helicopter parenting, and who would have thought that I would have actually learned a lot, even about myself. So thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
So if you are raising a child, or if you saw yourself in this conversation, Allyson's book is Please Don't Come Home Except for a Visit. This is Legitimate Matters, and I'm your host, William Paris. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next week. Thank you for watching Legitimate Matters. This is your host, William Paris. I want to thank my guest, life and business strategist, Allyson Hawkins Ward, for being a guest on the show. My guests in upcoming weeks include Willard Barth, daily life coach and author of The Anatomy of Transformation, Roman Castle, actor, writer, author of the book On My Way to Hollywood, and Jackie Wayans, TV and radio host, author, Don't Give Up and Win. For more information on Legitimate Matters and upcoming shows, follow me on Facebook.com/Legitimate Matters, or my YouTube channel, Legitimate Matters, or email me at wparis@legitimatematters.com. Thanks for watching.